Once a month, I host an episode called Get Curious, where we get curious about our survival patterns. This month, we're exploring our patterns that revolve around avoiding, being hyper independent, and I thought we'd also dive into some non committing patterns, but everyone who has commitment stuff didn't show up. So we'll have to save that call for another time. If you want to get the most out of this podcast, I encourage you to download the experiential guide so that you can follow along and inquire a little bit into your own patterns, see what stands out to you in this call, what do you resonate with, what can you relate to, and how can what we talk about guide you into learning more about your own patterns and deepen your awareness into why it is you may be avoiding things or be hyper independent and move through the world, always being fine. I hope you get all that you need out of this episode. Feel free to reach out if you have further questions. So, in this episode, we'll be exploring some of my favorite patterns. I definitely fall more into the realms of being hyper independent, liking to do everything on my own, avoiding things, being non-committal. And it's quite interesting because when I put the call out to like, who wants to join me on this podcast? I got lots of interest, but try to get non-committals to commit. That's, a bit of a challenge. The people pleasers, I had so many people, like I did 2 episodes of it because they're like, yeah, let me people please you and come on the episode. Whereas the non-committals are like, let me not say I want to do it, but actually, I don't know, make me talk about stuff or make me commit to something. I don't know about this. So I want to thank Paula and Rebecca for being here, for being open to committing to showing up, and for being open to exploring your patterns in this episode where we're going to get curious. So, what I'd love to do to start is to have the two of you introduce yourselves. You can share a little bit about where you are and also what your favorite go-to patterns are in the realms of hyper independence, non-committal, avoidant kind of qualities, and how those patterns impact your life. You know what? I'm also going to throw one more thing in here because I find it helpful for myself to just take a moment and notice what it is you're experiencing. So share who you are, where you're from, and your patterns, but also just give a little starting at the start, just give a little taste of like what in this moment are you noticing. So I can even start with that piece. Um, I'm noticing that as soon as I hit record, I actually found myself talking a lot faster. I shifted my tone a little bit. I'm a little less aware of what's happening outside my windows. As I said that, I looked up and I felt a breath come, and I'm slowing down, which happens often. There's a mosquito in front of my face, which I got. And yeah, I feel myself landing a little bit more just even by saying that. So I'm glad I slid that in because it allowed me to land here a little bit more with the two of you. So now I'll pass the baton and have you share.
You want to start, Paula?
Sure, I'm fine. I My name is Paula. I'm Spanish and I live in Bali. And I think favorite patterns is a bit of a tough, like, I don't know if I would say favorite. Um, I was I was more kind of trying to think about which one makes my life less of a misery.
Good one,
Um,
good one. More
yeah, I
misery
don't,
induced is good too.
and and it's tricky. And for me, because I am hyper independent to a degree that makes me ill and lonely. And I am also a people pleaser, so I'm avoidant. But when you said that people don't commit, I was thinking I have a lot of trouble committing to myself. I don't have so much for other people because the people pleasing there is still like I'm out of all of my patterns, maybe that's my favorite one because I feel like I'm quite well recovered from the people pleasing. The others are a little bit trickier for me. Um, but when you switched on the record button, immediately I go back into that. So I start thinking, am I doing this right? And do I look all right? So I try really, like whenever I'm on a Zoom call, I really try not to look at my face, because otherwise I think like, am I smiling enough, or am I smiling too much, or what are people thinking, that I'm a freak? Or yeah.
Good ones.
Yeah, that's immediately what comes up whenever I'm on a full screen recording, whatever.
But committed to be here, but also, ooh, am I doing it right? Do you even want to be here? There's another question for you in that mix of things.
I mean, I do want
I
to
know.
be here because I know you, so I know it's always going to be, I'm always going to get good insight, and I know that that's important for me, so that I'm happy with. But yeah, it is like, I get a lot of like, does my face look right? Am I, yeah.
Awesome. Anything else you want to add around some of your patterns? Or want to start just with what you shared, and we'll dive deeper as we go.
No, just the hyper independence
Yeah, what does that
one.
look like to you?
When you said that word, it immediately felt like lonely, because it's something that I've always been really, really proud of my whole life, that I'm a really strong woman and I don't need anyone. And I always saw that as such a plus. The same as the people pleasing. I always thought I'm a kind person and that's a good thing. And when you start digging around into seeing why. So yeah, so like the more that I dig into it, the hyper independence, it just feels lonely. And what it brings up for me, like the first thing that I think of is that no one ever asks me how I am. Because they always say like, but you're so strong, but you're fine, but you never need any help. So that's yeah, it's kind of sad and lonely side of it, I guess.
Yeah. If someone did ask you how you were doing, would you be able to receive support or share how you're doing?
Generally, I say I'm fine, because I always think like, I'll be fine. Like I can take care of myself. I am fine. Which then again just feeds into the people to stop asking. But
You know,
yeah, something like
I recently revealed within myself, I'm like, oh shit, I'm fine is a people-pleasing strategy. I hadn't even thought of it that way. I was so used to looking at it more as the avoidant. I was like, oh no, there's people-pleasing qualities in it as well. Yeah.
yeah.
Awesome. Thanks.
My turn.
Sure, if you want.
So I'll start with, I'm experiencing some sweatiness in my feet and my hands. I feel, a bit of activation being here. But it's like a night. It's an excited, willing kind of feeling, but I'm noticing that. And I just ate dinner before I came on, so I'm feeling the kind of the process of that. And I am Rebecca Roman, and I'm in the Michigan, Detroit area. And I am a SE practitioner and a Feldenkrais practitioner and a longtime yoga teacher, although I don't really teach yoga anymore. And some of my patterns, which this is interesting being here now, because they have been changing. Like this has really changed a lot, especially in the last few years. And when I was thinking earlier last night about the commitment one, I was like, I don't really have issues with commitment, but the commitment of like long-term, like planning a trip or planning an endeavor, maybe with my work or something, creating, my husband and I want to get land and move. And I notice when he brings it up, I just kind of get like, I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to plan it. I don't want to commit to it right now. So I've noticed that. And that gets in my way because sometimes you need, to plan to make things happen. And the hyper independence has been a long time thing that I have thought was really awesome about myself. As far as in a romantic relationship, I was single for a long, long time, and I got married to my husband in 2019. And so what I've been confronted with that is allowing this, letting him take care of things. And then I've noticed when he leaves town, I get scared because now I'm like confronted with, I've relied on you to carry the 5-gallon jugs of water. I've relied on you to buy the meat grinder to make our dog food that I cannot lift. And I didn't have a life like that before. I took care of everything. And it's brought up like to the core, a fear of loss. And then this relates to the sort of avoidant attachment, because that, as much as I want that, and I've worked on that a lot, there's a shyness or a withholding with some of that kind of connection and intimacy, especially verbally.
Great.
So, but as I said, that's all been changing a lot. But so I feel like I'm like in a very healing transformation. And then I sometimes feel afraid to admit that, because I'm an SC practitioner and a Feldenkrais practitioner, and I grew up doing Feldenkrais. My mom's a practitioner, and I work for Irene Lyon. And I'm an Not Yell method practitioner.
I should have everything together. I should be fine.
Yep.
I know that one well.
Yeah.
Yeah. What I love in what you're sharing, Rebecca, is like, you know, that there's been a lot of changes already happening. And that to me is that reminder of like, this is an ongoing process. This is an ongoing practice. And yeah, we can be all these things and have done all this work or be a practitioner of this and that, but it doesn't mean we're not human. And especially as as myself as well, the hyper independent, I'm fine, human over here, this has been a big part of my journey too, like learning how to not be fine and learning to not have it all together, especially when, you know, you present as a certain role, both as a human in the way I live my life and as a air quote professional. You know, it's like, oh, wait, oh, this has been really important to recognize that we're all human, we're all in our messiness, and we're all on this journey in whatever way we are on the journey, right? So, and the changes that can happen are so profound, and then it just continues to be profound. At least that's been my experience. Yeah. Yeah. So what I want to invite people listening to consider is, like, Paula has done a fair amount of work with me. Rebecca is a practitioner in the similar realms of how I work. There's a lot of awareness present on this call. And what I want to really myself as well catch is like pausing to invite all levels of awareness into curiosity, into what it is you're experiencing. And to notice what it is that you pick up on this call that you can relate to. And you might only relate to a component of it, or you might fully start to have deeper insights about yourself because of what is shared here, because I have a feeling we're going to share from some pretty deep perspectives. So we'll see what happens. But just wanted to drop that seed of like, when you're listening, you may have little nuggets that land, you may have big nuggets that land, you may have no idea what we're talking about, but I encourage you to just listen and see what it is you experience and let that be information for you to broaden your own perspective and understanding from. Yeah.
Okay. Can I just say, because I like all of the work that I've done with you has always just been on me, and like listening to Rebecca, it really gives me hope that someone who is hyper independent can be married and have a relationship. Because, like, full transparency, I've been single since uni, and I'm not going to say how old I am, but that's a really long time because I've just like so happy with myself. I like really can't deal with it. And just hearing you talk, I felt like my shoulders tense up just thinking about it. I have Mike, and then we talk about commitment issues, but I never stop to think about, of course, that affects relationships. just thinking about being married to someone and having to ask them for things, it made me feel so uncomfortable. My palms started sweating and my heart started speeding up. And the last time like I had a boyfriend and he told me he loved me, I had a panic attack and I had to sit down and like breathe into a bag type of thing. It was yeah. So it gives me a little bit of hope to see that you can yeah.
The first time my husband told me he loved me, I covered my face with my hair.
There we go. That's good old hyper independent responses over here. Yeah. Yeah. I've been single for a really long time too, so it gives me hope as well. It's funny because I'm like, people tell me I'm so picky. I'm like, yeah, but I want to be picky. And part of the pickiness is protection. So, it's noticing those edges for sure. Yeah. So why don't we do that next? Why don't we look a little bit at our patterns? And the way I like to look at patterns is to notice how I experience myself in the pattern. Because to me, there's so much information that lies within how we experience ourselves. And there's so much for us to pay attention to that gives us insight into what might be entangled or in something, or what might be kind of vacant and disconnected. So if you want to pick one of your patterns, and I'll do the same, I'm going to explore with you today. If you want to pick one of your patterns, it could just be the general broad hyper independence. It could be a little more defined piece of what you shared. It could be something you didn't share. But let's speak a little to what you notice when you shift into the pattern or when you're paying attention to that pattern, how you notice yourself. Who wants to start?
I'll start. I'm considering the avoidant. I mean, they're all connected, but just like kind of pulling in and avoiding,
Mm-hmm.
Connecting. And I'm thinking of the time recently, as I mentioned, when my husband left town for a week, that I felt angry. I felt irritated. I felt, as I tune into that now, like almost like a shakiness inside a
Mm-hmm.
little bit, but like moving backwards.
Can I ask a question about that, Rebecca?
Yeah.
So the anger that came, does
Mhm.
that feel like it comes after kind of the shakiness, or is the shakiness part of, yeah,
It comes after so quick that
yeah,
sometimes that's more present.
yeah,
And then in the behavior, I'm like irritated at him,
uh-huh,
even though I cognitively know he didn't do anything wrong. He had to go away for work, or deep down when he went fishing with his buddies, I'm really happy he's doing that.
mm-hmm,
Um, so that could be a pattern that I just shift into like the irritated,
mm-hmm.
angry. But yeah, at
And
first it's ugh.
yeah, and I find this can be really helpful when we're looking at our patterns. We're looking at how we experience ourselves in it, and we're also then teasing it apart to see the many different shifts we often make in those patterns. So if we're not quite as connected with the pattern, we might not notice we're irritated until we're irritated, right? And then all of a sudden we're in this irritation, we're angry, we're annoyed, and we can maybe guess why, but we aren't as familiar with, well, what were the things that happened before? And that's one
Mhm.
thing that I like to invite us to get curious about is like, end result is often a lot easier for us to catch ourselves in, but those earlier transitions are often a lot more challenging.
Yeah.
So to me, when I hear you talking about the agitation, I feel like some fight energy. I feel the leaning forward, present. And then what you had originally described was kind of the opposite of that, right?
Mhm.
So there's this shakiness, this kind of moving back. Do you think there's anything in between those two experiences?
Mm. I don't know about in between, but it's almost like before that,
Mm-hmm.
there's a feeling not capable.
Yeah. Which is what you described with moving the the meat crusher and
Yeah, or like if
um,
he puts a lid on, he puts lids back on tight.
right.
Like I even have a note on the fridge, please don't put lids on so tight. And I just want to open something. And it's
Uh-huh.
like, you know,
Yeah.
or it could just be a new jar of something. It's not that I can't do it. It's just the feeling of it harder.
Mm-hmm.
And then he's not here.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think that just feels very old and
Mm-hmm.
scary. I
Mm-hmm.
know that's connected to early developmental stuff for sure.
Yeah. So I want to bookmark. Well, I'm actually going to stay with this. Paolo, you okay if we roll with this and then we'll shift into yours? Perfect. So, Rebecca, what stands out to me in that is, there's something that's hard, there's something that happens, and then kind of the retreating, shaky, and then the irritation, the anger. Um, I'm curious if there's awareness in this piece that feels really young in the like I try to do something and then I can't. Um, what else do you notice there? I have a few things that stand out to me, but I'd love to hear from you first.
Like it doesn't feel safe to not be able to.
Hmm. And
So,
if we look at your physiology a little bit
mhm.
more. So anyone who's listened to episode 2, I talked to the threat response cycle. And there's something that happens when we shift out of feeling safe and feeling connected and feeling playful, feeling present, and we shift when we perceive a potential threat or something kind of heightens our senses a little, like, oh, what's going on? Like right now my dog's barking and he doesn't bark very often, and there's other dogs on the campsite here, and I'm like, oh, should I have been the responsible one? My senses heighten a little, my spine gets a little more rigid, and I'm kind of wanting to go check on him and look out my window. But right, I've shifted out of being in connection with you and into a little more of a prepped state of like, okay, what's going on? I'm wondering for you, when you realize you can't open the jar or when you can't, do the thing that's difficult, what's that transition that happens? What do you feel yourself moving into?
um, it's like panicky.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, there's just this sense of going backwards, like I'm
Yeah.
like I'm falling or I'm getting smaller. Um, mm, there's like a tinge of nausea.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there's what I would say sadness, but the sensation is just like like the beginning of where cries might come from
Yeah.
in the torso.
Something stands out to me in this, and I'm wondering if you feel alone in the experience as well.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah. Which often when we're stuck in the threat response cycle, we're stuck alone in our experience.
Mm-hmm.
And, when we get stuck in the threat response cycle and we're stuck in whatever it is we're experiencing, it's from that place we then develop our patterns,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I'm making a guess here. But there's this experience you have and like not being able to do something. And then the physiology kind of makes these changes. There's a little bit of emotion, a little bit of sadness, the experience of being alone. And my guess here is then, then it becomes way easier to not do something, to avoid it, or to not ask for help because no one's there. So I'll just do the things on my own or avoid the things that I find difficult, right? I'm just making some guesses, also just
Mm-hmm.
to invite other people to consider. Like we have all these patterns, but at the core is something similar to what you're describing, right? where we're stuck in this earlier time and help never came, or the nurturing caregiver was never there, or whatever it was. So we've got this history that shapes how we then learn to be in the world.
Mhm.
Yeah. Anything you want to add to that for
Yeah,
now?
that's totally it. And that's, I think part of my pattern then is, well, then I just got to do it myself. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
just going to figure it out, even if it's with anger,
Mm-hmm.
even if it's like, getting the jar open or whatever, just,
Moving the meat grinder and yeah.
yeah, and not like, not always tending to that more vulnerable part.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
though that's changing,
Mm-hmm.
it's
Mm-hmm.
like, it just feels right. That fight energy is more,
Yeah,
let's do this.
exactly. And how I often kind of map this out is like at the core is our trauma, right? Or these pieces that we're kind of dipping into here, right? Around that are the patterns we've then developed to not have to feel the depth of the pain that lies at the core of whatever it is we're stuck in, right? And then something you haven't noticed yet, but I'm going to name is then how we feel towards our patterns, right? So you have this recognition that there's these beautiful changes that are happening, right? And you haven't yet named other experiences, but for example, some people towards their I'll just get it done patterns might have judgment, might want it to be different, might, shame themselves for always doing things themselves and no wonder I'm single, blah, 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 right? So just to kind of point out those layers and what you're experiencing, but then also inviting other people into what they might also in addition experience. Anything you want to reflect on and towards how you feel towards this pattern of yours of, I'll just get it done and I'll do it angrily.
I'm over it.
Mm-hmm.
And um I don't like, and I even said that, which I said that to my husband. I said, I don't like feeling this way. I hate feeling this way. I hate
Mm-hmm.
feeling vulnerable or um really facing, like, even as my stature as a woman, like sometimes I watch him and he's a bigger man. He's tall, he's big and strong. And when he does things, just it's just,
So graceful, so easy.
and just kind of facing that, like, just biologically,
Mm-hmm.
I think in a way that I never have. I think for a long time I was just trying to mask that, like, I'm a strong woman and I'm gonna walk down that street by myself and do what I want and whatever. I've done lots of things in my life, but it's a mixed feeling. I sort of feel like towards it, but also a welcoming to, like, um a new sense of femininity and surrender.
Mm-hmm.
This feels
Yeah.
softer.
Yeah. Beautiful. So this is where it gets interesting, right? We kind of have at the core this piece that's stuck in time, that's alone, that's trying to open the jar, can't open the jar, or whatever it was at the beginning, who knows, doesn't really matter, but it's this experience of like, I need help and no one's there, right? And there might be some missing pieces to still unravel and uncover there. There's some experiences that you've expressed. There's the awareness of the sadness, and then there's the awareness of these patterns of just do it all yourself and get it done, no matter what it takes, push through, even if I do it with anger. And then this outer layer of like just being over it. Well, also wanting to show up in the world in this different way where there is the ability to be more in the feminine, to be softer, to be taken care of, to be also in like collaboration with, in an interdependent relationship is what I hear in that, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
So it's kind of like seeing all the layers that are at play. And something I want to speak to before we pause and then dive into a little bit of Paula's. And then I want to come back and see if we can explore some more of this like beginning piece that's there. Um, but what I like to point out is in these outer layers of how we feel towards our patterns and how we often want them to be different is how we can be in conflict with ourselves. It's like, I'm not saying you're doing this, Rebecca. I'm speaking more to the general audience of like, oh, I'm doing all these things that might be moving me more into my feminine, and I'm wanting to be softer and doing X, Y, Z to let myself be taken care of. But it's actually in conflict with the part that's stuck in time that thinks it has to be independent or else. No one's there anyway, so I have to do this. And this is where I find we often get in the way of ourselves. While it's also good to practice being more, I'm using in this context, be in our feminine, right? Where it's like, I'm creating a new pathway, I'm creating new possibility, I'm showing my system that, hey, we can be in the world in a very different way, where we can be supported, where we can soften into our abilities instead of having it all together and having to do it all. Yet we still have to go to the piece that we're in conflict with that thinks it has to be independent or else. Right? So naming that just to,
Mm-hmm.
I think that's somewhere where we often get in our own ways.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. So we'll dip into Paula's piece and then I'd love to come back and work with this little nugget that you shared. So thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Paula, what's your pattern you want to play with? You want to go
Uh,
just to the general hyper independence with the loneliness entangled in it?
yes,
Cool.
for sure. I was actually thinking because I mean, well, I've been recovering from a physical injury and I've been kind of bedridden for a little while. And at the beginning, I was finding it, well, you don't really have a choice. So I did think like it's my chance to learn to ask for help. So I was letting people help me. Because that's I think another part of the hyper independence for me, at least, it's I've gotten to a point where I have very few needs, or at least I recognize that I have very few needs. So if you don't really need anything, you don't need to ask for help, and that's a really like nasty trick to play on yourself.
But I'm
But I was
fine, so I have no needs, so it's fine.
yeah, and it's also like I don't need to drink now. I can, wait for a few hours for someone to come and fill up my water jug. And so I was accepting help, and I thought I was making a lot of progress. But the minute I could start walking again, it's like, I mean, yeah, I can ask for help, but I can also do it myself. And I've been just doing everything. And I'm traveling very soon, and I was thinking, which is really triggering, about whether I should ask for a wheelchair to be wheeled through the airport. And that just makes me feel so uncomfortable. And it's when Rebecca was talking about anger, it makes that's also like when I ask for help and something fails or I don't get it or I need it, and I also fall into anger. So if I imagine that I just like arrive at the airport and someone's like there with my wheelchair and like wheels me around and everything, then that would be lovely. But the idea of like them not being there and then having to ask again and then maybe having to wait and then having to do this and then feeling useless because I can't do it myself, and like that makes me feel so angry that my head starts getting hot. And um so yeah, so the hyper independence for sure is a big thing. All the relation like tied to relationships is another one that's really fascinating, because that for like got a very strong physical reaction there.
We'll play with this first one because I mean, I don't think we can go wrong with either of those, but you described the first one so great with the wheelchair situation.
Mm.
And something that stands out to me in that is this piece around no one showing up, right? I like there's some entanglement, coupling dynamics, right? It's like if I ask for help, someone's not going to show up. And that's going to lead to I mean, you didn't say disappointment, you instead just said anger, and anger is a great way to avoid feeling disappointment, right? So that stood out to me as kind of that pattern of like, well, I'm not going to ask for help because I'm not going to get it anyways, and then I'm going to be disappointed. Me saying that, not you. And I'll be angry and my head will explode and all that'll happen. I'll just chime in for me. I can relate to this this piece of like, well, I don't first off don't have very many needs. I don't need to ask, but if I do ask and I get disappointed, for me it's a screw you, I'm out of here. I don't get angry, I'm a fleer. So just to also name that as a great pattern that could show up in these dynamics of like, I don't want to feel disappointment, so I'll instead go on Facebook Marketplace and Craigslist and look for my dream van so I can escape and never have to feel this disappointment ever again. Thank you very much. Right? So why don't we explore that? This relationship with
Mhm.
not getting help. I keep sliding the
Yeah.
word disappointment in there.
And again, I think it's and by the way, like all of the anger, it's not directed at other people, it's directed at myself. So it's like I'm blaming myself for actually needing anything in the first place, or even
Mhm.
so it's I don't identify with the disappointment, but it is what's there, because in the end I've put myself in a place where I am vulnerable to be disappointed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
If you don't ask for anything, no one can ever disappoint you.
Exactly. Including
Yeah,
yourself.
yeah.
So I'm actually gonna start somewhere different. I'm wondering if you can describe what it feels like to be that strong woman that you mentioned at the beginning a little bit. Right? So even if you showed up at the airport as that strong woman, it would have a certain quality to it. Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit on how that feels when you're in that?
It's strange for me because I'm very, very soft and I'm very delicate and I'm very loving, but then I also have this side to me that's like a Navy SEAL. And it's like I will, like, even if my foot is broken, I will hobble through like to the airplane and I will be fine.
There's that
When
I'm
Rebecca was,
fine again. I'll be
yeah.
fine.
I'll be alive. I mean, and when I say I'm fine, it's like I'm alive. You know, I'm still breathing. When Rebecca was talking about the masculine and the feminine, I remember I had a boyfriend who was always saying like, oh, you can't do this because you're a woman. And I would always like challenge him. I would always just do it. And I carried him up a flight of stairs once because he said I couldn't do it. He said I couldn't carry, I don't know, I can't remember how the conversation went, but I ended up carrying him on my back, a really big guy, up a flight of stairs and really injuring myself, which no one ever find out about because I was like
Because
really
you're
upset.
fine.
Yeah. And it's that kind of thing of yeah.
When there's a will, there's a way for
Yeah.
some.
So I'll make it. So I do have those two sides to me. Like yeah, I'll push through anything and I'll do anything, but that doesn't mean I'll be physically or mentally stable by the end of it.
hmm hmm So when you're pushing through or when you're, that strong woman carrying someone up the stairs, right? What does that feel like? How do you feel yourself in that experience? I know for me, when I'm in that, I feel quite protected. I feel like I'm keeping everyone at a fair amount of a distance, like a good arm's length, if not more. I feel my spine goes really rigid, my ribs expand, um, my shoulders get broader. You can even hear it in my voice a little bit, right? I'm speaking like this, whoa, a little bit right now. There's definitely a rigidity and a tension in my muscles. And I know this well, and this is also a lot of work and has been changing. My traps used to be like up to my ears, not really, but that's what it felt like. So it was just like, whoa, I'm good. I'm carrying it all here. I'm good to go. Right. So that's my experience of being that strong woman that is more protected and in more of the I'm fine or I'll do it myself quality. Is there anything you want to share around your experience in that if you have one?
No, I think it feels like that. So it feels like I feel it in my back and I feel like my shoulders and I feel like really tight and strong there. But then I was just thinking it also feels really disconnected. It feels like when I'm in that mode, I just feel myself. Like I can't see anything else and I can't feel anything else. I'm really
Mhm.
disconnected from everything. And it's just like I can do this. It's
Yeah.
really
It's that overriding quality of like I will get anything done no matter at any cost, even if it involves walking through an airport with a broken foot. Yeah. Yeah. Great. Okay. So now let's dip a little into this piece around asking for help, or is it okay if we use the wheelchair as an example?
yeah.
So what happens and I like playing with the idea of something. And I'll just name this for those listening if you're playing with any of your patterns or any, reflections on anything. I like to play with the idea first because the idea is kind of like a broad vision of a thing versus imagining it. I'm already doing it a little. So if I'm imagining something, there's already more action involved. And I might, I find I can get a fair amount of information just by having the idea of something. It allows us to notice the nuances of what's going on. If that doesn't happen, then I might move more towards imagining this situation, and then I might get more information that way. But I just wanted to kind of invite the idea of something here versus imagining doing something. So notice what shows up at the idea of asking for a wheelchair.
There's two things that I immediately think about. It's one is just the idea of asking for help and not getting it. So maybe like I call and they're busy or they don't have any free or they can't accommodate me for whatever. So then that I feel that I have a reaction towards. And then another thing is, and then everyone will see me that I'm in a wheelchair, but I'm fine and I can actually really walk. Like I'm a lot, there are people who are a lot worse off than me and I'm just sitting here like being wheeled around. So then that it makes me feel shame.
Mm-hmm. So there's a few different things happening, right? There's making the phone call. There's a bit of a gap that I'm curious about, similar to what we did with Rebecca with kind of backtracking, but there's making the phone call, the idea of making the phone call, and then, but they're not going to have it. They're too busy. No one's there to help, really, right? And then there's the entangled experience of, well, if I'm in a wheelchair and people can see I can walk, like I'm air quote fine, then there's the shame. I shouldn't have this. Someone else is a bit worse off, right? So there's a few different layers here that we could dip into. So there's a few things we could kind of untangle here, but what I'm more interested in is the idea of making the phone call. Notice if there's something before the thought that, but they're not going to have one, they're too busy. What happens just at the idea of making the phone call?
I get like a lump in my throat and a profound sense of dread.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So we're kind of teasing it apart a little bit more, right? To notice more of the nuances of what's actually there that's then causing the thought, well, they're too busy, no one's there, no one can help anyways, right? So there's some dread there. Anything else you're aware of? Is there any fear about making the phone call?
Um, I don't think it's fear. Well, I don't know. Maybe I don't identify, like I just identify it as shame more than anything. Because it's again, like it's what if they might not be able to help me or they might not, but also what if they think I'm ridiculous and I should be walking by myself and there are a lot of, so it's the same, I guess, as when I'm actually being wheeled. It's like, what if they think that, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to pause for a sec here because I want to feel into something. There's something I'm interested in. Okay, let me see if this question has an answer. Is there anything before the shame?
Fear.
There it is.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
So
So what we just did is we just created a bit of space for the missing piece of a puzzle, right? It's kind of like often with our patterns, we're so familiar with certain pieces and there's missing pieces that we kind of need to tease things apart to find the missing pieces because it's in those missing pieces that we gather more information to see why we do the patterns that we do, right? So it's so easy for us to jump into shame instead of be in fear, right? Or like Rebecca described, it's way easier just to be in the anger than it is to be in that vulnerable place where I can't quite do something and no one's here to help me, right? So we so often jump over the uncomfortable thing to feel the things that are usually more rooted in our patterns versus the uncomfortable thing that's rooted in the trauma or rooted in what we're stuck in. So
but it's
yeah.
also really it's really funny because when you created that pose and I stopped to think about it and I recognized the fear, but I felt it before. So the first time that you asked me that question, I already felt that, but then I think, how can I be afraid of making a phone call? I'm fine. Like I did such a stupid thing. So then I did feel it, but then I just completely subconsciously, I just completely ignored it and said like, no, that's silly. And I just moved on.
Uh-huh.
So
And this is where the I'm fine pattern is so damn annoying because it's so quick. It's so quick to jump in and undermine what we're actually feeling because we're not supposed to feel anything if we're fine. Right? So it's these like subtle nuances that when we learn to slow down a little and catch them and be like, "Oh, yeah, I'm fine." It's like, "No, wait, what was that? How can I get curious about what that thing was before the I'm fine came in?" For me, um what comes in is it's not an I'm fine, it's just a nope. It's like the quietest, sneakiest nope, redirect, go somewhere else. So I've been practicing when I catch it, because it's still really hard to catch sometimes, saying yes instead. Just like change the word just to confuse me and see if I can feel a little of something of what's in that moment where I so quickly shift directions to avoid the thing that I don't want to feel because I'm fine. Thank you very much. Um, Cool. So let's weave it a little back together so that Rebecca can explore her piece and Paula, you can explore your piece. Because what we've done is we've kind of looked at the bigger picture of the pattern, teased it apart to find a little bit more of what's at the core of it. And that's what I want to invite other people to do as well. It's like, first off, get to know the pattern a little bit, how you experience yourself in the pattern, how you know you're in the pattern, even the thread of the pattern. And I speak to all of this in the experiential guide. But what's been really cool is in this episode, both of you have gotten access to what's a little bit more at the core of it. Right? So, Paula, you've got this glimpse into the fear, so we're gonna play with that. And Rebecca, you've got this glimpse into what I'm naming as you're alone, but in this like moment of vulnerability of not being able to do something, right?
Mhm.
So I'm going to speak to Rebecca's first because there's something that stands out to me in this, and whether it's the idea of mm, this is an SE practice. It's taught in intermediate 2 when we work with car accidents, and I find it such a juicy one. Doesn't have to be applied to car accidents, it can be applied to anything. But there's something that stood out to me while you were describing this moment where something was hard, you couldn't do it, and I asked if you were alone. And this invitation is there's this invitation I have around, well, what if someone could be there? If anyone in the world could come and help you, what might it feel like to imagine them there with you?
Hmm. I feel like right away I felt like a sense of spaciousness in my back, and almost like I came down into the ground a little more.
Hmm.
There's also a little bit of like embarrassment, a little bit too, that of needing the help, and the person, even though they're there, that I'm being witnessed, that I
Mm.
need the help.
I think that's a really juicy piece there because I
Mhm.
find we don't allow ourselves to be in that embarrassment and actually move through it
Yeah.
to recognize we're still okay, that someone does care, that that we can be dependent on someone. There's something in that that feels really juicy.
Mhm.
Yeah. So even if you wanted to right now to notice what it feels like to be embarrassed, and is it okay to be embarrassed? Is it okay to just notice what it's like and what happens after that?
Mhm. Yeah, it was kind of cringy, but And even experiences are coming in where I've done this.
Mm.
Um, and I've gotten the help and it was okay. And I did move through embarrassment.
It's kind of like that thread gets to be strengthened even more
Yeah,
bit by bit.
it's so new. It's like it's a new physiology, it's a new neural network to just be, to receive that and be okay, and the embarrassment, and yeah.
Yeah.
I think the pattern for so long was to avoid the embarrassment. And I think there was even things that happened that where the way that my psyche took it anyway was that what the person was saying and how they were being in a relational experience added to the embarrassment,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Yeah.
So like it ingrained, like you shouldn't need this help,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Um,
It strengthened that pathway instead of,
yeah,
yeah,
like you're not worthy of it or not valuable enough. And so then, okay, to be valuable or to be worthy, I have to be able to do it. So then if I can't, for whatever reason, that's part of why it's so that embarrass piece.
mm-hmm. Yeah, that feels like an important nugget to
Mm-hmm.
explore a bit more of.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, beautiful. So similar to Paula with the fear, where it's like, I don't want to feel that. I don't want to feel embarrassed. I'm going to move into the hyper independence to show I have worth, to show I can contribute, that I still air quote belong, instead of being in the vulnerability and the embarrassment and being supported by someone. Be like, I see you struggling and I'm here. And let's support you in learning how you can do this with me here alongside you
Mm-hmm.
as support. And the possibility of you're still contributing, and I'm here with you as you learn how to contribute. Yeah. Yeah. So fun, hey? All the little ways we interrupt our real sense of belonging and being worthy and instead find survival patterns that support us in being worthy and feeling like we matter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So if I were doing a one-on-one session, I would, get a little more curious on that embarrassment, and I can feel like there's some things shifting and some curiosities there in it for you, and I trust you know how to support yourself in this, but if you have further questions, feel free to reach out. But I almost feel like there's this like confusion in a different awareness of the embarrassment that's kind of rearranging, or
Mm-hmm.
something's happening there in the brainstem that I feel. So
Mm-hmm.
let that digest a little, and I'm gonna dip into Paula's fear and then we'll go from there. Anything else you want to add, Rebecca, before we move into Paula's fear?
Mm-hmm.
Perfect.
Yeah,
Perfect.
thank you.
No problem. So what we're doing here is we're just teasing things apart more and more and more so we can see the different layers that are at play or the pieces that are missing to support a deeper understanding of why we find ourselves in these patterns. It's interesting because I'm not really doing a session with people and these get curious episodes will often end up going the other direction, because a lot of the way I work is like, how do we support ourselves from a place of wholeness and have grace for our patterns, understanding that at the core is whatever it is we're stuck in. But what's really cool is this episode, we're actually moving more towards the core to actually do some shifting in whatever's at play. So it's fun. All right, Paula. So there's this new awareness of the fear that, you know, before quickly got shut down. At If it's available for you to notice, we'll use the idea of calling again. If there's this awareness now of there being a little window where you could experience fear of calling to ask for help. What shows up with the idea of asking for help?
So it's strange. It's people that I don't even know, but I'm like, there's fear of, I don't know if it's them thinking that I'm not strong enough, that I'm weak, or yeah, I don't know if it's them thinking that I'm weak or just being weak myself, or like a combination of both, I guess.
Hmm. So the idea of calling, there's some fear, and the fear is entangled with this story that you're weak, that they think you're weak. Okay, perfect. So in that, can you describe how you notice yourself in the fear? Are your eyes wide? Is there a sensation? Is there an image that shows up? Anything like that that you notice?
I was gonna, yeah, um, I was gonna say my skull feels kind of rigid, but then it's supposed to be rigid. Like I feel like yeah, just like really a lot of tightness just around here and here, like under my eyes, just that I don't know how that can feel tight. But yeah, as well as the neck, but it just feels like really, yeah, just
So there's sensation in the bones or in the skull. And would you say there's also like a pulling back movement?
yes. So it's like
Hmm.
it's, I guess, yeah, it's kind of pulling back, and then like my whole skull and neck and everything becomes really, really rigid. But here I feel it like really sore just around my eyes, really
Hmm. Hmm.
yeah, tight.
Okay, great. So what I'm having you do is notice the experience versus, oh, and then here these stories are overcoupled with it, right? Where it's like, oh, uh, you don't really need help. You're stupid. What are you doing asking for this? Like, who are you? All those things, right? So we're teasing that apart, leaving that a little separate and paying more attention to the sensation that's there that might be part of the fear. I'm not sure, right? So if we just notice as you feel what's happening in around your eyes and this pulling back and kind of the skull sensation, are you still aware of fear?
Yes, because it feels like a vigilant position. It feels like I'm kind of pulling back and kind of bracing for something
Hmm.
to happen.
Hmm. So would you be okay with actually following that movement just briefly? And I'm asking you to do this just as an example of like, oh, when we have a sensation, sometimes it's interesting to follow it just to see if we can learn more about what's going on, right? So often we feel something and we try not to feel it. So sometimes by following it a little, we might get some more information. So if you don't mind just even imagining your head moving back a little bit more, feeling whatever else wants to come with that. Anything else you're aware of in that?
Yeah, it's just that kind of tightness is spreading, and actually what I feel like I lose all sense of expression. Like I
Hmm.
can't yeah, I'm just so held back, like I can't, like my mouth goes really small and really like my eyes go, like everything just goes really blank.
Yeah, to me it feels like a state of shock or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like maybe with the fear or the terror, something feels so big that it's like a little bit of a shock, right? This
Yeah.
pulling back, this like holding the breath. I don't know if you're holding your breath, but there's
Yes.
something in it that feels like, whoa, right? So again, we're not in a session. I would explore this more if we were doing actual work. But what I wanted to point out is that in this is we're finding where you are in the threat response cycle a little bit more, right? We're finding
Mhm.
that moment where there's asking for help equals extreme terror, fear, pulling back, can't expressionless, maybe too muchness. I'm making some assumptions here. Um, does that land for you?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. So we're instead of like looking at the story that has been created around this, we're looking at what's happening in your physiology and where you're stuck in the threat response cycle. Because when we can shift that, then this entangled ball of yarn isn't entangled anymore. The relationship of asking for help doesn't equal total terror, danger, I need to freeze. what's wrong with you comes later, right? And well, just don't ask for help because no one's there anyways. That's kind of the narrative and the experiences that have been developed after that, and then not asking for help. That's a result of you being stuck in here. Okay. Questions or anything you want to comment about that?
I just had this image, which is just, I feel like a meerkat. Like, they go like,
Uh-huh.
it's because like that tension is spreading through my body, but where I feel it more than anything, it's just like my shoulder blades feel really sore now. And it just feels like, yeah, just straight up my spine. And it's like, that is that rigidity. It just feels like a meerkat, like looking out over a prairie to see what
What's
danger's
happening?
lurking
What's
around.
happening?
Yeah.
Ah, cool. So some of the things you would have skipped over in the past are now in your awareness. So that's something else you get to play with, get curious about. And how I want to finish this off is I want to invite both of you to see, like, at the core of some of your, independent, avoidant, we didn't really, I wouldn't say these are non-committal. These are more like avoidant, independent qualities, right? That if you see that at the core is some of these pieces that we're exploring here, notice how you now feel towards your patterns, right? The more we can understand what's at the core of them, the more we often have more understanding of why we do what we do. And there's a lot more space and grace for doing what we do. So either of you want to speak to that, of anything you notice around how you feel towards the reason why you're so independent? One of the reasons. I'm sure there's other pieces, but this might be it.
Yeah, I feel like like more at peace with it,
Mm,
like more of an honest clarity and acceptance that just feels like I just feel like lighter in my body and actually more of a sense in my bones,
beautiful.
and that it feels like not so clear, so like less confusing or less like victimized by it. Yeah.
Mm,
Like I guess then I'd say more empowered. Mhm.
beautiful. Beautiful. Yeah. Just allows so much more space for being in the pattern, but
Mhm.
not it being as much of a challenge for finding yourself in the pattern.
Mhm.
Yeah. And this is where I find it so powerful. Like, the more we connect with this part of us, the empowered sense of ourselves, right? We're able to hold ourselves in what we do in a very different way, as well as others, I find.
Mhm.
Yeah. Paula, anything you want to name?
Um, yeah, I just find this one's tricky because I mean, I have to like sit with it and like feel around it a lot more, but immediately I just want to jump into, okay, so I've seen that, but I'm actually fine. It's just a phone call. Like, what's going to happen? You're not on the like. So the I'm fine response is really, really damaging because it is so quick, and it's gaslighting yourself. It's minimizing absolutely anything that you feel because it's not a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
So it's yeah, that response is a killer.
What do you think the I'm fine pattern is helping you not feel? What's its job? What is it afraid would happen if it wasn't there to make sure you were always fine?
I guess I think it's probably the vulnerability because right because that's behind, like, when you're fine, you don't need to ask for help. You don't need to, you're never going to appear weak because you never need anything. So it's appearing vulnerable and like a human that has needs in front of other people, which you don't want to do. So it's
Okay. So notice what the consequences are with being vulnerable. What are you afraid will happen if you're vulnerable? right? That's the scary part.
Yeah.
So the I'm fine is helping you not feel the fear or the terror that comes with being vulnerable. So that's its job, right? So how you feel towards it is the next inquiry, because the I'm fine is like, what do you mean I have to do this, or else you're going to feel that fear. You're going to feel vulnerable and you're going to feel fear, and no one's going to be there, that you're going to be abandoned, whatever, right? We didn't do any parts work with this, but right. So the intention of the I'm fine piece is like, we have to be here or else. And then you have this piece of how you feel towards the I'm fine piece of being like, wow, I'm just gaslighting myself, right? And like, there's the conflict. It's like, I don't want to be gaslighting myself anymore. But the I'm fine piece is like, but we have to. There's no way I'm putting you in that place where you're vulnerable and you might experience that extreme fear or need to be on and trying to navigate what the heck is even happening, whatever it is. So what I'd invite you to do is just to see the layers a bit more and notice how you feel towards your I'm fine might be in conflict with the I'm fine. Right? And then if you wanted to, you could inquire a little bit more into the fear. Even though another part of you is like, okay, yeah, just make the phone call. It's just a phone call. Also acknowledge a part of you is okay, scared shitless to make the phone call. That both realities can exist at the same time. And that's already allowing some of that fear to be there a little bit more. Right? There might be a little more grace for that fear to be there and the pattern to be there at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Beautiful. Anything else want to be added before we send off into the world where we get to practice? Because again, this is the ongoing practice, right? Where we're teasing apart how it is we're showing up in the world. So in real life, we can notice maybe a split second sooner or way sooner. Oh, I'm moving into this. So how can I notice what else is entangled in my big ball of yarn here as I navigate my independence or navigate my avoidance of something?
For
Anything
me,
else you want to be sure?
the minute that you said that you can like allow both things to be there at the same time, then I felt like I could breathe again. It's like, okay. So that's, yeah.
Beautiful. Huge.
Yes.
That'll be your practice.
Yes.
Yeah, I like it. The I'm fine doesn't have to go away. That's for sure. I wish, wave it out of here. That's how I feel towards an I'm fine, clearly. Right? But the more we can learn, yeah, that it can all be there. All these different realities can exist at the same time. We're just learning to work more in collaboration so that the one that usually trumps gets to ease off a little and the edges of the vulnerability gets to be explored more and more. Yeah.
Yeah. It kind of reminds me of even just in the sensation piece, the physiological piece, like there might be that part of you that feels maybe butterflies as you feel afraid or embarrassed, but then you feel another part of you that feels neutral, that feels okay. And I don't know if you want to edit this out, but I just really want to share, Paula, I had an experience with the wheelchair at the airport, and they will just take you to your gate. Like it's pretty amazing, like how quickly you will pass everything, but it was so embarrassing. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. I was traveling internationally. I had to walk far. I was in a healing phase and I could walk, but I just was like, I gotta do this wheelchair thing. And I mean, one of the guys, even I needed to go to the bathroom. He took me to a handicap bathroom. And I had to tell him I can just go to the rural bathroom. Then at another, like JFK airport, I had to get on this bus to go to this other gate. And I was like, okay, I'll get off to get on the bus. Nope. A ramp came down. I was wheeled up a ramp. My stomach was flipping and I was turned in the bus facing everybody, like crying and laughing. But it was, I mean, like everything we're looking at here, I was just like, I just gotta do this. And I got through it, but it was like both. It was, but if you're running late, get the wheelchair because you get to pass everything. And they don't ask you why you need it. Nobody asks you. Everybody was, and when I shared this with Irene, she was like, she pointed out, wasn't it so awesome that you experienced that people cared and loved you? And that hadn't even occurred to me. I was just like, oh my God, I'm a burden and this person's got to push me through this, so I don't know. I just felt a lot as you were sharing, like maybe doing that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I appreciate that story, Rebecca, because it does show like all the many experiences that can exist at once and how certain ones can often be louder because that's what we're used to feeling.
Mhm.
Right? It's like, oh, wait, someone does care. I do maybe matter. Can I support that pathway in being strengthened or that feeling to be recognized, even though I'm so embarrassed and my stomach is in my mouth right now, And even though it's like, okay, asking is so hard and it goes against everything inside of me. And everything inside of me is having a hissy fit, even though a part of me knows this isn't a big deal and it's fine. It's like, no, I'm going to try this and I'm going to be uncomfortable in the whole process. And if not, I'll shut down. Great. When in doubt, your body knows what to do. It'll just shut down. Awesome. Thanks for sharing that.
Mhm.
All right. Thank you so much for the two of you for being here. And yeah, it's always wonderful to hang out with other interdependent people. Or not.
Yeah.
Oh, look at me.
Oh.
Slipping the word. We're becoming interdependent. Hyper.
And it's so uncomfortable.
It's so uncomfortable. Clearly that came in because we're all exploring the edges of being interdependent.
Yes.
That's funny.
That was awesome. Thank you.
Awesome.
Thanks so much.
Thanks so much for listening. I hope that this episode has provided you with new perspectives and insights. And if you haven't already, head to my website to download the experiential guide. Until the next time, I invite you to continue to pause and notice.